What is up, everybody? We are back, episode 29. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about the top quarterback performances of the week and how lucky are we that we got to watch both of these performances in the same game, which I think speaks even higher to their performances because they were duking it out with another baller on the other sideline. So, Aust, pretty obviously we're going to talk about, but let everybody know who is our top performances of the week.
We are going with Will Howard and Dillon Gabriel. And guys, it's rare that obviously you would ever shout a quarterback out as being one of the top standouts of the week on a losing team in a game. And yet that's how well Will Howard played. He answered the call. And so without stealing any of Mitch's thunder, as I toss that thing back to him and just laying the game out, is they were actually very, very similar statistically. So Will Howard was 28 of 35. I can do the God, dude, I lost the word, but I can do the fraction reduction there, and that is 28, 35 is 4/5, so that's 80%. Yeah. So that dude was 80% against a Dan Lanning defense.
Yeah.
And he threw for 326 yards and 2 touchdowns.
On the road.
In
Austyn Stadium.
On the road. Don't even begin to ask me the stats on this one, but Dillon Gabriel was 23 of 34, which is over 66%. I know that.
Yeah.
So over 66% for 341 yards and 2 touchdowns against at least what looks on tape or looked up to this week on tape like the most physically imposing defense, and you look at NFL draft analytics and stuff for that. Like, these guys have a lot of boys. They got a lot of boys coming back on this team, and you got a hell of a defense over on that side. So 2 incredible performances on the biggest stage of the week in college football, number 2 against the number 3 teams in the country. And as we start into it, Mitch, I'd actually like to start with Will Howard. And the reason I'd like to start with him is just because I think some people, K-State is one of those sleepy schools, and he got injured a little bit last year. So when people look at Kyle McCord, who's having a hell of a season, by the way, at Syracuse, him leaving and then replacing them with Will Howard, I think there were a lot of people there that were like, A, who is this guy? We don't even really know who this guy is. B is when you look at Will Howard's skill set on paper, it's not that different than Kyle McCord. We saw it be different this weekend, but on paper, I think a lot of us didn't know that. So, Mitch, you're more familiar with Will just in terms of watching him a little bit more. So talk about, who he's been and then what kind of goes into a game like this and why on a losing effort we would be shouting him out like this and talking about him like this.
Yeah, and I'm going to sound like I'm bullshitting here, but I've always been super high on Will Howard because I thought what he did at Kansas State was super impressive. I think he is overall a pretty complete quarterback. What I mean by that is he gets it done in the passing game, but I think people don't understand how well he ran the ball at Kansas State with Colin Klein as his offensive coordinator. Dude, they won a lot of games at Kansas State, and that's when Texas and OU were still in the Big 12, and they were competing for the Big 12 championship year in and year out. I also believe he is a career touchdown leader at Kansas State, and they had Colin Klein. So, let's be real here. That's a lot of touchdowns. I could be wrong. It might be passing. Yeah. Probably not career because Colin Klein had a lot, but he's the career passing leader at Kansas State, and that's a long line of good quarterbacks. So, I've always been high on him. I actually used to camp with him, and I'm going to camp shout-outs again. We went to Duke quarterback camp together as freshmen. It was the David Cutcliffe passing camp. And not to be arrogant, maybe we're sophomores, and I don't even know if he remembers this. He probably doesn't. But I remember when it was your freshman or sophomore year, and not to be arrogant, but every time I went to these camps, there was never a kid that could outthrow me. And he was one of the closest kids that I was like, damn, this kid can spin it. And I had to give him my credit. And that didn't happen a lot. Not to be a dick, but I'm just keeping it real. But he was a nice guy, obviously, but I think he's a really good quarterback. And to do what he did on the road, I was trying to think of what was more impressive, Dillon or Will. And I think each of them is impressive for their own reasons. And I'll get into Dillon Gabriel later. But I think why this was so impressive is, one, it was on the road. And that is a very, very hard thing to do. Winning on the road at Oregon when you're the number 2 team in the country and Oregon's number 3 is super, super hard. 2, you're playing a Dan Lanning defense, which is going to always be top to bottom, super sound, play their ass off, and have some ballers. And 3, he had to go back and forth with another great quarterback. Like, he was going toe for toe, series after series after series. And I don't think he's got enough credit this year because they have probably the two best running backs in college football, probably two of the top 5 receivers in college football. Bro, they were in that game because of him. He was the reason why they were in that game, and I think that just was super impressive by him. And I just went on a little rant there.
Well, I love the rant. I want you to party hat the rant because I think sometimes we take for granted how familiar we are with these guys, and like because we're so familiar with these guys, we already understand things that sometimes we don't articulate to people. And I think like when I talk to young quarterbacks, or when I talk to fans, just in general, like something that I think they always go to that they ask is like, yo, like who would his player comp be? Like who is he similar to? And like, it's kind of a tough one with Will Howard, but I kind of have an idea of mine. Like if you were to think about Will Howard and what a player comparison would be to maybe somebody that we know that's a little bit more notable, like what would you say? Like,
Riley Leonard, 100%.
Yeah.
Like they're literally identical. And to be honest, Will Howard is outplaying Riley Leonard at this point in the season.
He is.
And again, I was high on Riley Leonard because I played against him 3 years in a row at Duke, and he fucking lit us up. Like, lit us up. He threw all over us, and he could run the ball really, really well. I would say Riley Leonard's probably a little bit more athletic. But again, I don't think Ohio State runs Will Leonard. Will Leonard. No, not Will Leonard. Will Leonard is one of my. I know Will Leonard. Will Leonard's one of my friends. Sorry, I was talking too fast. I don't think I don't think Ohio State runs Will Howard as much as they could. So I don't think people see that athletic side of him. And I know Riley Leonard gets a lot of carries. But yeah, I mean, those two guys going into the season were probably number 1 and 2, 2 of the top 5 guys off the draft board.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at who sees the opportunity a little bit more, I think it's Will Howard. And here I am sitting in my basement talking shit about 2 NFL quarterbacks. So what the fuck do I know? But I think that's a great player comp. And I think Will Howard had to kind of separate himself and put him into the top 5 conversation after this week.
Good. And I think, and for me, like, I think Riley Leonard and Will Howard kind of fall in the same buckets, just in the sense that like K-State and Duke, like not 2 teams that are on primetime television all the time. So I think there are a lot of people who are less familiar. For me, I was actually going to be even a little bit more ambitious, is say it's kind of like a poor man's like Josh Allen type of thing, where he's like this very big player, very physically durable, is accurate with the football. And like, to be quite candid, like Josh's improvement in his first 3 years in the NFL, insane. Like,
bro,
what he did in college, like he tried to run people over, sure, and he was athletic, but he really was like this big hoss that threw 100-mile-an-hour fastballs on everything, and his mechanics were very different. I would say Will right now is a lot more polished than
100%.
Josh was in college, But just for those guys, like he's a big dude. Like I don't think people understand how big he is, probably because he's in that fucking Ohio State huddle, honestly. But like he's a big cat, and like again, Colin Klein used him in a lot of quarterback power stuff off jet sweep and a lot of quarterback counter stuff, and you're not seeing that as much at Ohio State, but he definitely has that in his bag. And then 28-35 against the Dan Lanning defense, just to also throw a little bit of Dan Lanning at you, is like Dan Lanning was the defensive coordinator at Georgia when they took off and became what was almost or could be considered like a dynasty. And the way he did that is, I love defensive coaches. He's a head coach, obviously, but a defensive coach that understands what the quarterback is thinking. So, like, he understands what the quarterback is thinking. He understands what your protection rules are. So, like, he's masking and decorating everything defensively so that you have to see through that stuff. And there were a lot of 7-up looks, 6-up looks that he got where, like, you're talking about 6 and 7 guys at the line of scrimmage, where I've always thought, like, it's just impressive to see a quarterback throw that slant confidently, knowing that nobody's backing up off the line of scrimmage, like bailing out from that pressure look. It's so hard. It's so hard. Because obviously, for those that don't know, like when they bring 6, 7 up like that, they have 2 or 3 different things that they do out of that look.
Yep.
So, like, for a guy to confidently throw a slant, knowing that the middle of the field is going to be open, like, he knew pre-snap what that 6 or 7 man look up front was going to be. And that just speaks to his football aptitude, and he's seasoned and he's played a bunch of games. So anyway, we can get off the Will Howard train for a second, but like, thought that was super impressive, especially on the road. And I think for Ohio State fans, that's why I said, like, they got to be kind of excited coming out of this week. It's because even though Kyle McCord is doing awesome stuff over at Syracuse right now, I definitely think they upgraded at quarterback. And I think that for them, like, that was their big thing, right? We got the defense. We have the players on offense. Can Will Howard be the guy? And even in a loss, he showed you he can be that guy. Like, he can be that guy.
No doubt.
Now, this one I'm even more excited to talk about, Dillon Gabriel, because candidly, like, you had things in his career where he starts at UCF, then he goes to Oklahoma, and they're explosive as hell at Oklahoma, but he had Jeff Lebby, who was his offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. And for those that don't know who Jeff Lebby is, he's the head coach at Mississippi State. Don't judge a book by its cover in year one right now. He's getting adjusted to the SEC, with a team that doesn't have the talent right now. And so you're going to start to see
starting quarterbacks out for the year.
And the starting quarterback's out for the year, exactly. But I talked to my guys over at Oklahoma when he was at Oklahoma, and I watched Dillon on tape, and I was like, I don't know if his arm strength wows me like that. He's accurate, kind of like a Drew Brees, Steve Young type guy that I'm like he does things well, and he's very good. He's balanced, but like, is this guy in that top echelon of college quarterbacks? And for him to leave Oklahoma and get a bag dropped on his head to go to Oregon, it's like, oh shit, like, you got to answer the call. And I talked to a couple of my guys that are now at Mississippi State that coach Dillon, and they were like, he's a dude. And then I talked to some of my guys that went to the Manning Passing Academy, and they were like, we love that dude. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, like, this guy has like the character shit. He has the it shit to him. And I thought you saw that in the way he played the game. So statistically, again, as I served this thing back to Mitch, he was 23 of 34 for 341 yards. And going into the week, everybody has been talking all year and even in the offseason about that Ohio State defense. Yeah. And so you throw for 341 yards against that defense with those dudes. What did you watch, Mitch? What did you see in the way that he played, the way that he carried himself? Just talk about Dillon Gabriel's performance.
Yeah, and not only did he throw the ball well, he ran the ball well. And I think people would underestimate that too. And the thing that was super impressive to me and why I think his performance was a little bit more impressive than Will Howard's was, like, now I did say Will Howard was the reason why they were in that game, but Will Howard has some dudes around him. And so does Dillon Gabriel, but not like Will Howard. And I think what was so impressive is kind of how we talked about a few weeks ago, how Jalen Milroe was going to have to be Superman to beat Georgia, and he was. I think Dillon Gabriel was kind of playing that same role. And when you hear all that talk about their defense, and then you watch them on tape, and then they've proved it and backed it up week after week, to go out there with no fear and to be the aggressor and to feel like you're the best player on the field, super impressive, dude. Because that was a prove-it game. That was a huge prove-it game.
That was make your money game, dog.
Make your money game. That is 100% a make your money game. And he played awesome and was the aggressor, dude. I mean, they hit explosive after explosive, and he had no fear. And he was a killer. He was a cold stone killer, and it was awesome to watch. And that was super, super impressive to do that.
I'm going to pick up right from where you left off there. When Mitch says no fear and being the aggressor, like, to me, against a great defense, Mitch played Clemson, like I played South Carolina, LSU, Alabama, the works, right? Is like, to beat a defense like that, you have to put them on their heels.
Yeah.
You have to. Like, if you don't show them that you're willing to put them on your heels and you execute in a couple of those situations, especially early in the game, like, it's going to be a long night.
Yep.
And I saw in the late second quarter that he had thrown for 212 yards. And I looked at my dad and I was like, dude, he threw for 200 yards in like the first half against these guys. And then I remembered, like, there were two pressure situations for Ohio State where they manned up. And like Urban Meyer's classic talking about man coverage, he's like, he's the guy that goes Jimmy and Joe's over X's and O's. And he goes, cover 4 works when you have 2 corners that can man everything.
Yeah.
He's like, cover 4 is a bend, don't break defense, and you can kind of chunk me all the way down the field, like if I don't have those corners. And for those that don't know, it allows your corners to basically cover 4, you're playing deep quarter, but like you have man pass off responsibilities in particular situations. And if you have dudes at corner, they can come play 4 or 5 yards off that receiver and get their hands on him and stuff.
Yep. Yep.
And so you saw man looks that turned into pressure, and Dillon knew it. And Dillon went, all right, let's go. And there were 2 streaks that he completed, and the ball was completed over 40 yards down the field against, I believe, Ohio State's best corner in an All-American corner.
Yeah.
And it's like the way, again, it's the way he threw it. Mitch just talked about it. Being the aggressor, no fear. It's like those balls led those receivers. He was not worried about how that corner was going to play it. He said, this is where the ball should go on this play. And he threw the ball the way that he threw the ball that reflected that. And so I think it speaks to his makeup, like his moxie. And then also is I love how Oregon does their post-game interviews. Like they have this cool setup that they do where it's like, it doesn't even look like they're in a media room. It kind of looks like they're in some, you know, Nike futuristic place. And they just got the little mic in front of them. And for young quarterbacks, and I send this to our guys all the time, is go watch Dillon Gabriel's interview after that game. Like just speaking like he started 50 games in college football. And he was just talking like, this is what these big moments are about. We knew that we had to do this. We knew that we had to step up in these situations and play fearless. And the way that we approached it was the way that Dan coaches us. And it's like, I couldn't help but be overwhelmed listening to him going, dude, this is what Mitch and I are obsessed with, is quarterbacks that sound like they're the head coach.
Yeah, yeah.
The way he was talking was literally, it sounded like Dan Lanning was at the mic. Like, just the perspective, the depth of perspective, the knowing what they needed to do, knowing the environment, knowing the team they were playing against. You know, a big thing is when you're a young quarterback, like Nico, for instance, that we were talking about earlier, like there's so much focus on just executing your job. And like, I think the best in the NFL and the best in college football are the guys who aren't even worried about executing their job. Like, they know their job is going to be taken care of. They're playing the game within the game, the situational aspects of it, the how are we going to beat this team? Because against Ohio State, like, again, if you don't put them on their heels, like, it's going to be brutal to try to win that football game. And he kept them on their heels and went toe for toe with that team and was able to come out on top. You know, as we clean it up, Mitch, is there anything else there with Dillon Gabriel that you saw or anything to throw on top of that?
Nah, just super impressive. And I think he's been a super consistent winner over his college career. So he's a hell of a player.
Awesome, man. And again, you young quarterbacks, like there are those guys to go listen to. Right now, like I love listening to Quinn Ewers, but my 2 right now to listen to is Cam Ward and Dillon Gabriel. And it's like those dudes have played a lot of ball. They've been slighted or disrespected at early stages in their career or high school and have kind of eclipsed that mountain to now leading 2 of the only 3 or 4 undefeated football teams in all of college football. And there's a reason they're doing it. There's a reason they're doing it. It's funny that I said Quinn, too, is the other one is like, those are the big 3 right now. Oregon, Miami, and Texas. And all 3 dudes transferred. All 3 dudes have been through it. And yet all 3 dudes are at, you know, Dillon's a little undersized. So, like, we'll see how the NFL draft goes. But those other 2 are at the very top. And Dillon is undoubtedly one of the best college football quarterbacks right now. Now, in terms of shouting out guys, like, around college football, there was one that we didn't mention that I'm going to throw out there at the end of this. But we go Jake Retzlaff at BYU. BYU's undefeated. I'm going to have you talk about these guys, Mitch, a little bit, but Jake is undefeated, and they pounded Arizona. Arizona is a good football team and a great little quarterback over there, a competitor, a great receiver out on the perimeter, and their defense shut Utah down a few weeks ago. So, like, that's a tough game, and they took it to them. So BYU is for real, for those of you that don't know that. And it's a lot of Jake Retzlaff as well. Another one is Sam Leavitt. the quarterback at Arizona State. It was tough, dude, to watch Cam Rising in that game, man. He's just been injured so many times that, like, you could just see he wasn't good. But I don't want to take anything away from Scoutaboo and what Sam Leavitt was able to do. And we've talked about him a few times. And then I'll save the last one for after you clean up those two guys. But Mitch, as you go, Jake Retzlaff and Leavitt, like, what do you see from those two guys? Because they're at two schools that a lot of people don't see as much.
Yeah.
And one of them is climbing the ranks big time. And then ASU, I think, is like 5-1, dude. So, like, Leavitt's coming too. But what do you see out of those two guys specifically?
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, and I think last episode I was talking about my Big 12 sleepers. I forgot to talk about, BYU's in the Big 12 again. And dude, they got a hell of a defense. But again, Retzlaff's playing really good ball, and he's just super accurate, super efficient, and can make all the throws. He's a super athletic player, and he's been fun to watch. So I think with a good defense and with him playing at a high level, they can make a lot of noise and make a little run in the playoffs. And then, Sam Leavitt at Arizona State, we talked about him, I think, like maybe week 1 or 2. We just loved his toughness. Dude. He's just a tough dude. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he's a younger guy.
He is.
Just
seeing
seeing
Michigan State, but he's a younger cat.
Yeah, a younger cat, but just seeing him play his nuts off, dude, and just he's a gritty dude. So obviously you and me love that. That's how we were playing it, just undersized dudes running around and playing with our play like chickens with our head cut off. And I like watching him play. So he's a hell of a player. Both of them are.
And a lot of what Mitch just said, right? Competitors. And then I think a trait that you're starting to see when we bring up the point guards conversation at quarterback is like guys that feel the game. Guys that just feel the game. And, like, those guys are beating you with that Tom Brady thing where, like, no one ever talked about his legs. Yeah. But his functional movement within the pocket was incredible. Incredible. And I know you posted Big Ben on Quarterback Science the other day. Like, very similar. Like, you just feel space and you feel what's going on around you. And I think a lot of the best quarterbacks in college football right now are doing that. So you throw competitive temperament with being able to feel the game really well and having enough legs out of those two guys. And those are two guys that are playing at a really high level. And then maybe the dude that I can't believe we didn't talk about him before this, but maybe the dude right now who is stealing a lot of the narrative in college football this season that feels the game and is a competitor and his interviews are fucking hilarious is Diego Pavia. And it's, dude, I'm a Vandy guy. There it is back there, dude. And again, I bought the number 2 jersey. It's in the mail. It's coming to me, dude. And again, because of what he stands for. And you go on the road to Lexington, Kentucky, and Kentucky beat Ole Miss, and they're a very good football team. And Vandy controlled the game. Yeah. And not only do they control the game, the way he's playing is aggressive. It's a lot of the Dillon Gabriel, a lot of the Retzlaff, a lot of the Leavitt shit, and you beat Alabama, and then everyone goes, oh, emotional letdown. They're going to let it down. And it's like, Vandy is 3-2 going into this week. They have beaten Alabama and Virginia Tech, and you go on the road to Kentucky, and you put it on Kentucky, dude. Like,
put it on them.
This guy's a living legend over there, dude. So
they're number 2 in the SEC standings.
And I see I saw Jordan Rogers the other day, my boy. He played quarterback in Vandy as well, and he goes SEC power rankings at quarterback, and he's like, dude, if you beat Alabama, you are number 1 on my list
100%.
at Vandy. And it's like, dude, it's tough to move him. Like, obviously, he's probably not the best quarterback in the SEC, but he's right up there, dude, and he's playing unbelievable football. Mitch, anything for Diego Pavia just as we conclude episode 29?
Dude, I love watching him play. He's gritty as hell. Gritty as hell.
Dude, I wonder do you know who they play this week? Do you know who Vanderbilt's got?
No, let's check.
Let's check it. Because Vanderbilt right now, guys, is a team, and obviously I'm bragging about my school. They play Ball State this week, so they're going to win this week. So they'll be 5-2 at Vandy. 5-2, dude. And then, they'll probably get bludgeoned at home by Texas. And then Auburn, South Carolina, LSU, Tennessee. I mean, it don't get easier in the SEC, but
they might sneak out 8 wins, though, dude.
Ooh. And that's just one of those teams you do not want to play, dude.
Hell no.
It's like that Yale basketball team, like where it's like, dude, they just D up and play zone defense and hit threes. And it's like, we will kill this team on paper, but I want nothing to do with playing this team. And
Oh, dude, they got a tough schedule, bro.
it's brutal. Trust me, I had to play that shit, dude. It was rough. It's
Oh
like,
my God, they go Texas, at Auburn, home versus South Carolina, at LSU, home versus Tennessee, bro. I think they can get. They'll get Ball State. So they'll be 5-2. They'll get Auburn. I think they get South Carolina. I'll give them 7 wins. They got Texas, LSU, and Tennessee, bro.
yeah, that's brutal. But who knows, dude? He might have a statue built by the time they play Tennessee, and anything can happen in a rivalry game. So we'll see. But Diego
Dude, Tennessee,
Pavia,
they might get it, bro.
what?
They might get it. Tennessee's struggling.
I'm saying, dude, the Locked In Athlete Pod is all in on you, Diego. So
Yeah.
anyway, it concludes episode 29, and we're doing something different in episode 30 this week. We talked about quarterback tough situations, and we'll talk about it to start episode 30. But this week, we didn't want to have to search for somebody to kind of talk about what they're going through, and it came to us, and we're going big balls of the week, dude. And we're going to Garrett Nussmeier at LSU. So pop over to episode 30, guys. Rip us up in the comments, and we'll see you over there.